News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
Karen, we begin with the latest comments from President Donald Trump. He gave a wide-ranging interview with CBS's 60 Minutes, heard on Bloomberg Radio, that covered his talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping, immigration raids in major U.S. cities, and more. The president has said the status of Taiwan never came up in his discussions with Xi, and that prompted this question from correspondent Nora O'Donnell.
Would you order U.S. forces to defend Taiwan?
You'll find out if it happens. And he understands the answer to that.
Why not say
This
it?
never even came up yesterday as a subject. He never brought it up. People were a little surprised at that. He never brought it up because he understands it, and he understands it very well.
And on the subject of immigration raids, the president was asked if ICE tactics against immigrants and protesters have gone too far.
No, I think they haven't gone far enough because we've been held back by the judges, by the liberal judges that were put in by Biden and by Obama.
The president repeated his claims that many detained immigrants have criminal records, and he says he could invoke the Insurrection Act to send regular military into cities rather than the National Guard if he wants to.
Well, Nathan, President Trump also discussed the government shutdown, now in its 34th day and on track to be the longest ever this week. The president tells 60 Minutes he won't be extorted, in his words, by Democrats who are demanding an extension of Affordable Care Act subsidies that expire at the end of the year.
Obamacare is terrible. It's bad health care at far too high a price. We should fix that. We should fix it. And we can fix it with the Democrats. All they have to do is let the country open and we'll fix it.
But Democratic Senator Mark Warner says the time for the president to negotiate is now.
Everyone, as of Saturday, saw health care rates skyrocket.
Right.
This is an immediate crisis, too.
Right, we've blown past that date of
we
November
can
1st.
deal with this jointly, but it's going to require the active intervention of the president.
Well, Karen, President Trump says he will skip this week's Supreme Court hearing on the legality of his worldwide tariff regime. The president spoke on Air Force One as he returned to Washington from Mar-a-Lago last night.
I think it's one of the biggest decisions in the history of the Supreme Court. Other countries use tariffs against us. If we weren't able to openly and freely use tariffs against them, I'll give you an example. China. That was going to be a disaster for the world, and I was able to settle it very quickly, very easily, because I was able to use tariffs.
On Wednesday, the Supreme Court is scheduled to hear the president's appeal of a lower court ruling that many of his Liberation Day tariffs exceed emergency powers to regulate imports.
Nathan, reactions still pouring into the U.S.-China trade deal. A regulatory advisor to Beijing says the summit was a breakthrough in bilateral relationships where China was treated as an equal partner of the U.S. Some other developments: the U.S. is expected to suspend port fees for a year on China-linked vessels starting next week. And China will effectively suspend the implementation of new export controls on rare earth metals and investigations into American companies in the semiconductor supply chain. Still, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has warned the U.S. must still be cautious.
I think and I hope after the agreement and the goodwill between President Xi and President Trump in Korea that we can depend on them to be more reliable partners, and the rest of the world can depend on them. But we can't take that chance. We don't want to decouple with China, but we're going to have to de-risk.
And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent made the comments on Fox News Sunday.
Turning to markets now, Karen, stocks begin a new trading month on a winning streak. The S&P 500's gained for 6 straight months. The NASDAQ 100's done even better. It's up 7 straight. Wall Street looks at another busy week for earnings with consumer companies in focus. We get a preview from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
More than half of S&P 500 companies have reported quarterly results, and Uber and McDonald's earnings will likely underscore deteriorating consumer sentiment in the U.S. Emily Rowland is co-chief investment strategist at Manulife Investment Management.
Certainly earnings have been a huge positive. This earnings season's been spectacular. 10.5% earnings growth, 82% beat rate.
Also reporting this week, tech names Palantir, Qualcomm, and DoorDash, along with Warner Brothers Discovery, Pfizer, and Yum Brands. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.